because the government team believes that healthcare is still not affordable and there are still millions of Americans who are either uninsured or are not getting care because they can't afford it, we think that we affirm this resolution today, which is this House believes that healthcare needs a change. Let's get into our observation one, resolutional interpretation. Subpoint A, we're going to define this as a policy debate. Subpoint B, the terms, we're going to define this House as the U.S. federal government. We're going to define healthcare as the healthcare system in the United States that is governed by the Department of Health and Human Services. And we're going to define change as the change will be that the government will now offer subsidies to citizens who buy plans on federal exchanges, not just state-run exchanges. So now let's get to our C point, our plan. Plan text. Government will offer equitable subsidies not based on a state-run exchange, but if they buy healthcare from one of the federally run exchanges, they will get the same subsidy as a state-run exchange. And funding is going to be normal means, which is money comes from the government, and time frame will be immediately. Are there any questions on that?
Yeah, I do actually have a question.
Yeah.
When you say government's going to offer subsidies for federal run, does that imply that these are a partnership between private and public things, or is that this is solely federally run?
No, so let me give you some background. There's a little bit in my A point, but I'll give you a little bit right now. So, there's been this dispute, and right now there's this Supreme Court case that's being heard, King versus Burwell, and it's that only 13 states have set up state-run exchanges, and within the Affordable Care Act, it says only if you've gotten your plan from a state-run exchange are you eligible for federal subsidies. So I'm trying to change that to make it so you are eligible for a federal subsidy even if you buy it on a federal exchange. D point, criterion, net benefits. All right, first, Advantage 1. I'm going to tagline this, affordable care. Advantage 1, affordable care. Harms is, the first harms is that right now there are tens of millions of uninsured Americans. And while the passage of the Affordable Care Act has led to a drop in that number, that doesn't mean that the care that they're getting or insurance they're getting is any more affordable. Because of this, many Americans are putting off even getting insurance or getting health care that they or their family need. According to the Washington Times on November 28th, they were analyzing a recent Gallup poll that showed that 1 in 3 Americans put off medical treatment that they or their family needed because of either the cost of the specific treatment or the cost of that they would have had to pay for their insurance. So that's pretty startling that even though healthcare is supposed to be affordable, 1 in 3 Americans are saying they're putting it off because it's too expensive. The second harm scenario is that the Affordable Care offers subsidies currently only if the citizen bought their plan on a state exchange, which right now only 13 states plus the District of Columbia run their own exchanges, meaning that 36 states, the large majority of the states, are run by the federal government. So this means that basically most people are not eligible for a subsidy. That was supposed to be the entire point of the Affordable Care Act, was government-subsidized health care. The inherency is a provision within the ACA that says that you only get subsidies on a state-run exchange. And so that's why our solvency is that because we removed that provision and we changed the ACA, that we will get the solvency of now all 50 states offering subsidies. So what does this do? Impacts. 1, affordable care. Finally, the plan will work how it's supposed to work, where everybody can get a subsidy regardless of whether or not their state chose to set up an exchange. The second impact is that you're going to see equity amongst citizens. So it won't be like because we live in California, we get subsidies, but someone who lives in, let's say, Texas, and their state government decides not to set up an exchange, now they have to pay a lot more for healthcare. That's just inequitable. So that's our second impact, is we get equity. But our final impact is we get healthier citizens, because as people, like I talked about in the first harm scenario, that Gallup poll, as the healthcare costs less because it's subsidized, they're going to be more willing to go out and get care that they need. So all three of those, I think, are pretty substantial impacts.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify. Do you know if citizens in these states that don't have these state-run programs are any less healthy than the federal ones?
I don't know, but I just know that if you make healthcare cheaper, people are more likely to get it. Advantage 2, you can tagline this: effective governance. The harms right now, the government is facing very low approval ratings, both in the executive branch with Obama and Congress, and not to mention the Affordable Care Act even is getting very low approval ratings, even from Democrats. For example, Charles Schumer earlier this week criticized Obama and his implementation of the Affordable Care Act, so even Democrats are taking aim at it. And this is leading some citizens to not get health care because they don't trust the government and they don't trust that the Affordable Care Act is actually doing what it's supposed to do. The inherency here is largely attitudinal, that there needs to be an attitudinal shift where people see that the government is now doing something for its citizens and doing something equitable that makes sense. So that's why our solvency stalls for that attitudinal block, where we offer more people subsidies, and they're going to see that we're willing to change laws for the better. That even though the Democrats were willing to put a lot of stake and value into this law, they're willing to see, okay, maybe there were some mistakes and let's change it. And so the impacts you're going to see are, 1, an increase in the trust in government. 2, increased trust in the healthcare system. 3rd, increased trust in Obama. But how those are really going to impact out magnitude-wise is, like, for example, on Obama's executive action, you're going to see more immigrants coming out of the woodwork in order to claim their residency status because they'll trust the government more. You'll see more people getting health care because they'll trust the government. And you'll see a more active citizenry as they realize that their government is there to help them and is in their best interest. So for the first time, I'm proud to propose that this House believes that health care needs a change.
Point of order, my timer is sexting currently. What do you do about this?
He has to read it out loud as his thesis statement.
My thesis statement. Oh baby, oh baby. Okay, for a quick off-time roadmap, I'm gonna go off case and then on. So 2 DAs and then on case. Okay, so just to get started, the negative team wants to say that we should take a wait and see approach before we take any action. So let's get straight into our off case. Observation 1, disadvantage 1, we're going to call this system shock. Right now, Obamacare is too new. Not many people know how it works. We don't know all the nuances. We don't know whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. We have to wait and see while we see if the cost outweighs the benefits of Obamacare or if the benefits outweigh the cost. We still don't know. The B point is here, we haven't given Obamacare enough time. It was only really implemented a year ago, and there's not enough data to see what the general trends of Obamacare is. So then the C point here is the internal links that the plan changes this and it extends Obamacare. So the first part is going to make more, it's going to expand Obamacare before we even know if it's a good thing. So first of all, the impacts of this are going to be, it's going to lead to more confusion. Less people are going to know when they're covered or what they're covered. It's going to lead to, again, higher prices, just like we saw when Obamacare first came out in a normal state. Companies had to adjust their prices. So we're going to see, at least in the short term, an increase in prices. And then we're going to see a decrease in health because this is going to incentivize people to go get Obamacare because they're going to see it expanding. They're going to see all the harms that when you first implemented it again. Then also, they're going to make the government redo the website to incorporate 37 more states. They couldn't even get it working for 13 states to start. So how are they going to able to have this? This means the site's going to take longer. It's going to crash. Less people are going to be able to sign up for healthcare, all leading to less health and less people having access to doctors or healthcare or being healthy. So yeah, that's how it's going to shock the system because literally the website, it doesn't even have the power to deal with 13 states. How are it's going to deal with all 50 of them? Secondly, our DA2 is going to be politics, and this is a big one. So the A point here is that Republicans tried to repeal Obamacare over 50 times while they were in office. Now the Republicans have a majority in the House and the Senate, so they're going to be more likely to try and repeal Obamacare when you're expanding it. So this means that since Republicans have control of they're going to either fight the president on this or vote to repeal it completely, and that means Obama then is probably going to veto it, leading to such things as a government shutdown because they're going to stop. They're not going to agree on this because he expanded Obamacare. They're going to start the fight over again, which is going to lead to another government shutdown, more time wasted in Congress, more people. So then you have people losing their jobs because their jobs aren't being funded if they work for the government. So, and you have a loss of public services for the people. So again, you have a loss of health. If you try and expand this, at the minimum, Republicans are going to fight you over it, which might shut down the government. But at the maximum, they are just going to repeal Obamacare entirely, meaning you'll lose all the good work that Obamacare has done before. Joe's plan is essentially just to increase it because he doesn't think it's covered enough people, but by expanding it, you're actually going to remove everyone it's already helped so far because either Republicans are going to shut down the government and deny access to these public service so they won't even be able to, so people are going to lose jobs and lose health, and then maybe hospitals run less efficiently and less health, or they completely repeal it and then there's no way for people to, they'll be stuck with the old healthcare system that clearly didn't work. So now let's go to his advantage one of affordable care. He said there are millions of uninsured Americans and putting off getting health care. 1 in 3 are putting it off because it's too expensive. And I will say that his plan's not going to change. Just like I said before, when Obamacare was first implemented, prices went up because insurance companies had to readjust. So it's going to make more people less likely to get it. Second of all, on his impacts, he said it leads to more healthcare because you're going to start this fight all over again, a fight that most of us are pretty safe in assuming that it was over or that we got past the worst of it. You're going to decrease the amount of healthcare available for citizens, so you can turn all his impacts because it's going to actually go to less health for less people because of these fights that Congress is clearly going to have with President Obama. They did it 50 times when they weren't in power. How many times are they going to try it when they now have control of both houses of Congress? Let's go to then advantage 2, effective government, which is his A point here was implementation of the Affordable Care Act is bad, which is exactly why you should not try to expand it, because now if you give it to 50 states, not only is the implementation going to have to be done all over again, it's going to have to deal with significantly more people, which they are not prepared to do. This is because of this fighting. Also, how can you have an effective government when they're always shutting down the government and fighting about the same laws that they passed over and over again, or they're trying to repeal a law over and over again? It's going to increase gridlock, less effective government. Then they said people distrust the government now because they're not getting enough health care. This constant fighting is what led to the distrust. We saw that last Congress had the lowest approval rating in history. That means that people don't trust the government when it's infighting, when it's fighting with itself and it can't get jobs done, which is what you're doing. So you can turn this whole harm scenario around because you're going to just increase harms. You're going to increase distrust in the government because things won't get done. Then his inherency was attitudinal. Again, you're just going to make things worse because you're going to have this fight all over again. You're going to hear the talking points on the news all over again. The distrust in the government is going to increase, not decrease. He says his plan changes, and it shows that government is willing to change. But that's not how people are going to see it. They're going to see it as Obamacare expanding. We should give it a chance so we can see whether or not it's good or bad before we actually change something, so that we can see if the costs outweigh the benefits or the benefits outweigh the cost. But he's not giving it time to do that. He's just plain expanding it, meaning more fighting in the government, less trust of President Obama, more partisanship. So then this is all going to lead to less immigrants taking care of amnesty because they don't trust Obama to get things done, a less active citizenship because they'll just see the gridlock and get fed up with it. So this is why we oppose the resolution, and we just believe that Obamacare needs more time. Thank you.
Alright, off-time roadmap. I'm going to go same order with the off case and then I'll go case.
You look a lot like your partner. You look a lot like your partner. Are you guys like
Yeah, we're twins actually. I think you know how that works. Because the opposition team in this round seems to think that we should go on letting millions of Americans continue to not get health care and continue to not get federal subsidies. That's why we continue to uphold the resolution that health care needs to change. First, we're going to get to off case. So their first disadvantage one is system shock. A point is that first they say that the Affordable Care Act is too new and we don't need to know if it's good or bad, so we should wait and see. My first response is first, it's not new. The Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, meaning it's currently in its 4th year, and we've been seeing each year new parts of the Affordable Care Act that are being rolled out as it's slowly being expanded, which is what the Affordable Care Act, basically how it functions. So my second response is so that we know if it's good or bad, and the answer is not that simple, that it is good or bad, but that there are parts that are good and there are parts that are bad, and so that's why the fight between lawmakers now is not to repeal it, but to try to take out those parts that are bad and try to make it a good law that's equitable. That same response to their D point, when they say that we haven't given it enough time, it was enacted 1 year ago, so we don't have enough data. This is its 4th year, and so we do have enough data. We know how many people got coverage. We know how many uninsured people got coverage that didn't before. We have a lot of data on this, and that was obviously one of the tenets of the ACA was to try and get data on these things. I'll get to at the bottom of my responses. So drop down to the impact level 1. They say this is going to result in more confusion. Turn this, I think it's going to result in a lot less confusion once people realize, like, okay, so the federal subsidies do apply to everybody. Instead of just people in certain states that have a state-run exchange or a federal exchange, even the member of government was asking me questions because they seemed confused about, like, well, wait, like, how do these exchanges work and who gets subsidies and who doesn't? It's a confusing thing as it is, so we're trying to take the confusion out of it and make it equitable. So their second impact is that this is going to increase the prices of healthcare. I don't know whether or not this is going to increase the price of healthcare to the government or to private insurance companies, but I can turn this as far as how it's going to relate to the consumer. The consumer will see cheaper healthcare prices because they're going to be getting federal subsidies. So the healthcare plan and premiums that they'll have to pay are the same as they will now, except for the government will chip in and help them out with that. Their third impact about a decrease in health overall, turn that and cross-apply my argumentation about my advantage one of affordable care. and like how I brought up a Gallup poll saying how 1 in 3 right now Americans are putting off healthcare because it's too expensive. We're making that cheaper, so we get solvency. We get the turn there that more people are going to get healthcare. They talk about like one of the reasons that's going to happen is because the website, right? The website can't even deal with 13 states. How's it going to deal with 50? The website right now deals with 50 states. That's one of the things that was so confusing about it, is that people thought that if they bought their plans on the website, that means they should get a federal subsidy, but then they'd have to look and see if their state had an exchange, which people weren't doing and didn't know that they had to do. So people ended up not getting subsidies, and people were confused as to why that was. Also, the website was fixed. Yeah, it was rickety at first because it was a large job, 50 states at first. It's since been fixed, and that the website has been out of literature. We haven't seen anybody talking about it, and it seems to be running fine. So all of those impacts are turning. Now let's get to disadvantage 2 of politics. First, their A point was that Republicans tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act 50 plus times, and because they're now going to have control of Congress, they're going to repeal it. My first response is they had control of the House when they voted to repeal it and still didn't do it. So far it hasn't happened. But secondly, this is the even stronger response, I think, is that the Republicans aren't going to repeal it, and here's why. Republicans want this change. For a while, Republicans have been pinpointing individual changes that they've wanted in Obamacare. For example, like a mandate for large employers to have a 1-year extension on whether or not they have to cover all of their employees getting health insurance. And so then they amended the ACA to take that extension. Republicans were happy. And so Republicans are really going to want this. Since it's not an expansion of the Affordable Care Act, this is how it was supposed to work in the first place, it's not going to uniquely increase any sort of infighting that goes on. Yeah, and sorry that I missed your point of information earlier.
So, because the Republicans have more power here now, and because most of the states that haven't implemented Obamacare are Republican-controlled, why do you think they'd be more likely to accept an expansion or a perceived expansion of Obamacare?
Well, first off, I don't think they're going to perceive it as an expansion. And secondly, the Republicans are mostly concerned right now with Obama's recent immigration executive action. They haven't been concerned with the Affordable Care Act as of late. And then next, they say that this infighting or repealing is going to lead to a government shutdown. I'm going to say non-unique. Right now, it already looks like Obama's executive action is going to make the Republicans cause a government shutdown because they're not going to want to pass the funding that has to do with his executive action. So whether or not plan passes, the government will probably get shut down. But then it's going to start back up again, and healthcare is going to be funded the whole time. So even if the government shuts down, it doesn't mean we don't get solvency. And Republicans have like always been talking about different extensions within the ACA, and they've gotten some of them, and they've been happy with that. So their only impact is basically like a no solvency, and that no solvency, and so the Affordable Care Act then will stop being in place and providing help for those who've helped so far. First off, there's no the only offense that it'll stop those who've helped so far. But my first response is A, that it's not going to be overturned. Secondly, because Republicans don't have any counterplan that they're going to replace it with, so they're not just going to have no health care for the country. And so also the Affordable Care Act won't remove those who have helped so far. Even if they were, by some shred of the imagination, to repeal Obamacare, it doesn't mean that these people's insurance plans that they've bought from private insurers through federal exchanges are no longer valid, so people are still going to have their insurance. Now let's get back to case. Before getting to case, I want to say this, that even if we get solvency for 1 month before Republicans debate this, and we get 1 month of solvency of people getting cheaper insurance and getting health care, you're going to be voting government for upholding the burden of proof. But we think that we're going to get it in perpetuity. So let's get to case. First, on Advantage 1, their response was that like the plan won't change the prices because like the healthcare, because the insurance companies are going to increase their prices. My response is what it was originally, that the price that citizens are going to see is going to be lower because it's going to be the same price that insurance companies are offering now, but with a government subsidy. There's nothing more that the insurance companies have to do, so they're not going to raise their prices. So then they drop to the impact level. They only responded to our third impact about more healthcare, about how people are going to get it, and they said turn less because of political fights. We already said that this is going to clear up confusion, and the Gallup poll warrant makes people more likely to get healthcare. So turn this back, and we're going to have healthier citizens. On Advantage 2 about effective governance, just cross-apply my arguments on my previous politics argument about how this isn't going to be a perceived expansion and how even Republicans are going to want this. And so all of our impacts are returned as we see more trust, more health care, and therefore you've got to be voting government.
All right, for roadmap, it'd be beneficial to start with the off case, and then I'll touch on the on case. So, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to the audience, the judges, my partner, and my opponents. I'll start with the first disadvantage we have: system shock. I'll respond to a few of these things. So, not new in the fourth year is something you claim. However, it was only implemented with, as in like people were able to access the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. That was last year. It barely passed its 1-year mark a few months ago. And so when you say we have 4 years of data, we don't. We have barely a year. We have 4 years of thinking about this plan, but we only have a year of actual implementation, which is more important than actual like conceptual stuff because it tends to be very different in the real world. And so you say parts that are good should be changed. I'm sorry, should be left alone. Parts that are bad should be removed. That's the goal of the Republicans in a lot of ways. Mostly Republicans, as you say. However, there are states that, from the get-go, the Affordable Care Act that did not want to be a part of this. One that comes to mind is Kentucky. They are totally exempt from the Affordable Care Act because their senator, the Republican senator, only agreed to vote for it if the state was exempt. And this shows that some states want private companies alone to deal with their health care. And this guy was reelected, so the citizens had a choice to say, oh no, we actually do want the federal government to manage or to give a subsidy for part of our health care. And the state of Kentucky said no to that. And so to claim that Republicans want the parts that are good, they don't want the parts that are bad is incomplete of a notion. In addition, for the system shock, it's still a viable thing because in a Forbes article recently, they showed how with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, there was a 3%, only a 3% increase, increase in the cost of healthcare from 2012 to 2015. In 2012, going from 2011 to 2012, there was a 4.9% increase, and in 2011, 2010 to 2011 was 8.5% increase. This shows that the cost is actually going down, and this is interesting. It's a year of data of the Affordable Care Act. We're seeing marginally good things, and so to expand something that we only have a year of data that shows some promise is dangerous because, first of all, like I said, the states that don't want it have already made it so very clear. And the second thing is that these gains are only with the states, are only due because certain states wanted it. And everyone's happy in this federalist system that certain states have the option to not rely on federal subsidies for their insurance programs. And so the whole point about this federalism is like, as the negative team, we of course believe that healthcare could be better. However, should it change? Absolutely not. Until we have more information to deal with and to make smarter decisions in the future. We turned our confusion impact. And so you cited my question as a source of confusion. However, questions do not equal confusion. And it's still important to know that, like you said yourself, there was a lot of confusion from the get-go of Obamacare. And so the implementation of this and any change that you bring to your system will yield more confusion. So it's better to wait and see what happens. Consumers will see cheaper healthcare, as you claim. Yeah, but is it any better? So we're seeing a small decrease in price, but we're also seeing at the same time that a lot of people now have access to less variety of doctors. And a lot of these new plans insurance companies are making with these federal subsidies. And so you're actually seeing a limitation of what healthcare can do. And so, more people might have access to healthcare, be able to afford healthcare, but is it necessarily better healthcare? We don't know. The data's not out yet. And it seems to be that it's actually restricted. So our disadvantage two, politics. You said had control of the House. The House only deals with the financial issues. The Senate ratifies all these things. We know this. Is now they have the Senate. So this is a huge thing. They have complete authority. In fact, they have an amount of people where they could conceivably overturn a presidential veto at this point. So to say that it's not a concern, that it won't be an option, I think you're going to actually see a lot of Republicans vying for this, even if they don't actually implement it, which will create stress, like you said, and a lot of political arguments were brought up. Yeah.
So if they do vote to overturn it, when will that happen?
If they do vote to overturn it,
Yeah.
Well, obviously after the new House is brought in, there would be the potential for. But even what I'm saying is the potential for an overturn or increasing political language about this topic will yield more confusion in this matter. In fact, with Republicans in control, you're going to be seeing a lot of one-sided arguments against the president. It's going to be a very confusing argument. So you, with the disadvantage of either shut down or completely repeal, and you said it already looks like the government will shut down. However, that's not a reason to say that we should try to increase the risk of it. Your plan would increase the risk of government shutdown, adding even more pressure to an already pressured situation, bring us to the brink. We don't want to increase the pressure, and so that disadvantage still stands. You said it would start back up. Well, sure, it would start back up, but perhaps after a lot of damage has been done to the Affordable Care Act or something, Republicans might find some way to get back in the law, perhaps. No solvency, we said, and you said. Okay, so you said that even if it was stopped, people's insurance plans would still be valid. Yeah, but if they can't afford it, then how are you planning to go to solvency if their plans are valid but they can't afford it? So that doesn't make much sense. And even if 1 month, that's still good. We're trying to look for lasting solutions in this debate, I believe. Solutions that progress us instead of simply stimulating the economy maybe for a month, metaphorically, and increasing some solvency. But we're looking for lasting solvency in this debate.
So what do you propose to get lasting solvency?
The status quo, because we need more data before we can make an informed decision and have lasting solvency. So, with regards to the on-case stuff now, you said that the plan, your plan, will decrease the cost and allow insurance with the subsidy, which is good because it allows more people to afford it. However, this is also increasing the reliance on the federal government for citizens to have healthcare in the first place. And this goes contrary to what a lot of politicians, what a lot of people in America believe should be the norm. They believe that perhaps it should be more of a local or a state thing. The point is, there are varying opinions, and putting it all on the federal government to provide subsidies for these uninsured people is not a very strong position, because if that fails, then there's really no backup, because we're eliminating states that only rely on themselves and have to come up with innovative solutions. And so we're also, you claim that there's going to be a healthier citizens as a result of decreasing healthcare. However, you have cited absolutely no data to support that. And I'm at a time advantage to, okay, I'm out of time. I kind of covered it in this manner, so.
Oh, it's it. He had been over time on the first one. Okay, so a quick roadmap. I'm just going to go voters and then a two-world. Okay, so my first voter is going to be system shock. Because, like my partner said, there's warrants that are saying that change is going to upset the system, that the website can't deal with all these things, that we need to wait and see before we have any data because we only have 1 year's of data, so we don't know what can be like just an anomaly or what have you. So we don't have enough information to go on. So a change is going to shock the system. So that's our first voter. It's going to lead to more confusion, higher prices, and decreased health because and because of all the confusion that any change is going to occur, because of the adjustment that insurance companies are going to have to make to people's health cares and to the quality of health care that people get, like my partner says, is going to decrease because the health care, because they don't have access to all the doctors they need. So my second is going to be politics. Because the Republicans have tried to repeal Obamacare over 50 times, because just throughout the last session of Congress, they were always trying to repeal Obamacare. They never really let it go. You're going to open up that wound again, and you're going to have a government shutdown, or like my partner said, increase the risk of a government shutdown, make it last longer. So the effects of this will be longer and more lasting than that. So if you want to avoid a government shutdown or have or avoid that brink scenario, because now you're just piling reasons for the Republicans to shut down the government onto the system. That so you're going to have a government shutdown, and then you're going to also and then you also have the chance that they do repeal it because now they have enough votes to override a presidential veto. This means that all the good work that Obamacare has done in the past is going to go by the wayside. This means that the insurance companies, once the original policies run out, they're just going to remove them, and low-income people are not going to get any sort of subsidies. So all the warrants that Joe brought up in his original case are going to just re-happen again, but instead of just for the people who don't have Obamacare now, it's going to happen to everybody who ever had Obamacare. So you're going to do away with all that good work. Then my next voter is it's not going to help affordable care because it increases a perceived reliance on the government. This is just going to make Republicans angrier. So why poke the hornet's nest? And then, so really, this is why you should vote for us. And I'm just going to end it with the two worlds. And if in our world, we think it's more likely that the Republicans who have tried to overturn Obamacare with less power than they have now, with less votes in House than they have now over 50 times, that they are going to definitely try it now that you're trying to expand it. If you think it's more likely that Republicans will be upset by this, now that it's going to be viewed as a perceived expansion, because let's be honest, when have Republicans ever perceived anything the same way Obama has? Or you can vote for the affirmative, which thinks this simple expansion is not going to hurt, it's not going to upset the status quo, it's not going to increase the gridlock in the government. If you think that, you should vote for the affirmative, but we think it's a lot more likely that Republicans are going to be upset and that it's going to cause gridlock and distrust in the government. Thank you.
Gotta get going.
Okay. Yeah. You didn't have to say goodbye. You kind of figured it out.
No, I know. I just wanted to hear your two worlds.
Okay. Let's see you.
I didn't interrupt you while you were. I saw you. I came before you started. I didn't want to interrupt you. I saw that. He was like leaping.
Alright, off-case roadmap, I'm going to go off-case, and then case, and then voters. Alright, I've got a lot to get through. So let's start with disadvantage one. I'm just going to get to some responses. So they still are trying to say that it's still new, even though it's been law for 4 years. We only have 1 year of data, and like people were really only able to access it 1 year ago. that like people have been able to access it for 4 years. The exchanges went live over a year ago. 1 year of data is enough to see what's going on. And right now, that data tells us that the healthcare system is flawed because there are people that are not getting subsidies that should because they can't afford it. Then when they talk about finally the turn on healthcare because people are going to have a decrease in doctors, that it's not going to decrease the amount of healthcare because the Affordable Care Act is already the law of the land. So when that passed, the healthcare dropped the quality, but now that's the law of the land. So making it cheaper doesn't make it any worse. Then for the impact turn on more confusion, they say that any change you do yields more confusion. I'm just going to say that's blatantly false. Here are two big changes that didn't yield more confusion. One is increasing civil rights because it was so common sense that when people did it, it was clear. Secondly is prohibition, or repealing prohibition, making alcohol legal again because it was obvious. Just like the plan that the government is proposing today to make federal subsidies available to everybody, not just only people in 13 particular states. So next on their disadvantage 2 about politics, I want to make really one main point clear. I've already made arguments about how Republicans won't repeal it, how they already, changes have been made to the Affordable Care Act that Republicans have wanted and didn't repeal. And so I want to make first that Republicans aren't going to repeal it, and they haven't been talking about it, they've been talking about immigration. But secondly, that even if we get solvency for 1 month or 1 week until the new Congress comes in, that's still 1 week of solvency. And then if the government does shut down, it's going to start back up again. And then we get all the solvency after that. And they don't provide us any harm, like why a government shutdown is bad. So in and of itself, you're not going to be voting that that's really a big deal if our plan causes that. They just say that it's going to increase the risk of it happening. Now let's get to like our main advantage about affordable care. Basically, they say that putting it all on the federal government is bad. My response is, first, that's the goal of the Affordable Care Act, but secondly, that's what you're seeing all developed countries around the world do, is putting healthcare in the hands of their federal government, like in single-payer systems, and it results in actually healthier people. Look, for example, in the UK, where they have a lot lower obesity rates and a lot lower rates of heart disease than we do because they have more healthcare because it's more affordable, so people aren't putting off going to the doctor because they can and it's affordable. So let's get to advantage 2, effective governance. So these were arguments that came out of the LO, or I think, no, that came out of the MO. They said that it makes things, like if people hear about it on the news, that they're talking about this change, it's somehow going to make people not like the government more. No, people are going to like it more when they hear about the government realizing that one of their laws was flawed. Their arguments about too many people to handle. We're not making Obamacare like apply to more people. We're just making the subsidies apply to more people, which is a really easy change to make. And so now let's get to voters. First, I'm going to address theirs. Their first voter was System Shock. My response is look to my responses and turns about how change is not always bad, how the website is good enough, and how we have the information to specifically be able to make judgments that it's flawed. Their next voter was politics. My response is first, they have no impacts other than like no solvency for intermediate amount of time while the government is shut down, but then it will resume and we get solvency. And then they say there's a chance to repeal, but it already didn't happen when they implemented this law, which was so important, and it didn't get repealed. So there's no realistic chance of repeal, and even if there is, they don't give us, or they don't tell us necessarily why that's bad, and people would still have their healthcare plans. But their third voter is that it doesn't help affordable care. But let's get to our voters. Our first voter is that it does help affordable care. We provide you a Gallup poll that people aren't getting care because it's too expensive. And then we tell you that it's too expensive because they're not getting subsidies that they are supposed to have gotten. And so that's why we're giving them subsidies that make it affordable. But our second voter is that it's equitable. So we're making it affordable, but it's also equitable. So it doesn't matter what state you live in, the federal government still is going to make sure that you can afford your health care. And when people see that the federal government is going to make sure they can afford their health care, people are going to have a lot more trust in government and are going to be a lot healthier. And that's why you're going to be voting for the government.